I'm Kent, and this is another Weekend Adventure Rides how-to. Today, we will be starting the assembly of the lower half or the case. Now, I've already gone through and cleaned up these cases using the same method that I did with the cylinder head. Now, we'll go through a quick montage of that, and I'll show you exactly what we did. Okay, that is the case cleaning process. Now, I originally wanted to, in this video, is just go through and pull all of the seals and the bearings and then show you how to replace those. But I've decided that I want to clean this case up a little bit better. So I'm going to take this over to my family's garage and we are going to polish these cases. So I wanted to give you a good look of before and after. So these are mostly clean. All the dirt and oil, the debris that was on there is all off, but the cases are the case cover anyway is kind of scratched and needs some repair. So I'll actually go over there and using a tabletop grinder and a wire wheel and then a polishing pad, we'll get these all cleaned up and looking nice so that when they go back on there, it'll look brand new. Probably better than brand new, actually. These are all cleaned up. They're looking nice. Let's get started on polishing these up, and then we'll be back here, and the second part of this video, I'll go through replacing the seals, a trick to replacing the bearings so that you don't damage the cases, and I'll show you how to do all that. And really, you don't need any crazy tools for this. All right, don't go anywhere. All right, so we are back from the family shop and we have the case halves all shined up looking nice, and then the case covers as well. So they came out looking pretty good, nice and shiny there. Now they're not mirror reflective and I didn't really want to go that far with it. I think that's excessive and it would kind of look funny, but a little shiny, looking good. Anyway, so the next part we're gonna do is get the remaining bearings out of these case halves. Now, when I dismantled it, most of the bearings were pretty easy to remove. I either used a socket with an extension on it that fit the outside race of the bearing and then just tapped it out with a rubber hammer or rubber mallet. So there are two more bearings that remain in here that are not accessible from the back side. So what we're gonna do is heat the case up in the oven to 212 degrees. We'll set the oven at 350. We want the case to reach a temperature of 212. And that should cause the aluminum to expand enough that the metal bearings should just fall out. If they do not fall out, I do have a blind bearing puller and we're gonna use that if needed. And then following that, I will show you how to put the new bearings back in place. So let's get started on that. Okay, so we just got this out of the oven and it is ripping hot. So we are going to go ahead. It looks like one of the bearings actually fell out in the oven and the other one is just barely hanging on. So we're gonna drop this a few times. And there it goes. All the bearings are out. So those bearings came out pretty well with that technique. Just heating it up and then I dropped it down on these pieces of wood here, popped right out, no problem. Okay, so I've got all of my seals here and now I've put the bearings into the freezer so those can cool down and shrink. We're going to put both sides of the cases back into the oven, and we'll let those heat up for another 30 minutes or so, and then we'll pull the bearings out of the freezer, bring them out here, and then bring the cases out and drop the bearings in, and hopefully everything works pretty easy and we get them in first try. So if the bearings don't want to cooperate and go into the seats all the way, we've got a few sockets here, and these approximately fit the outside races of these bearings, so we'll use those to knock the bearings down. Just be careful with that. You don't want to cause damage to the bearings, so we're going to use a rubber mallet and those sockets to do that. So let's get these back in the oven and get them heated back up. So I almost forgot to mention this. There is one seal that needs to go in before the bearing goes in, and that's on the left side of the crankcase. So we'll drop that in now, and we'll get that all seated in there so we can not have any problem putting the bearing in. And this one's unique because it has a flange on it. It's the only replacement seal that has a flange on it, so you'll be able to identify that. And you'll see one side is flat and has numbers on it, the other side is indented. There's a little spring in there. So the number side, that's going to go to the outside. So we'll get that in there right now. So I'm going to use a little assembly lube on this just to help get it in there a little easier. That should just push in nice and easily. All right, I just grabbed the bearings out of the freezer, so I'm gonna go grab the first half of the case, and we're gonna see how this works out. All right, no time to waste, here we go. Make sure you know what you're putting in there before you put it in, I guess. Awesome. Fits perfect. There we go. Got it. All right, now that we have all of those bearings seated, I'm gonna throw a little bit of motorcycle oil into those because this process can create some moisture now, and we don't want to have these seize up or get rusty. So I'm gonna throw a little oil in there, and then we'll move on to the other side. Okay, here's our second case half, and we're gonna get these bearings in there real quick. Outstanding, slipped in easy. Here we go. And our last one. There we go. So easy as that. If you use the oven method and then freezing the bearings, they should go in really simple. So that was surprisingly easy. Now we'll just add a little oil to those bearings so that they don't seize up or get rusty. And that's pretty much it for the bearing install. Now we're gonna go through and install the seals. So the case half is cooled down a little bit. We are going to get this seal in here. So we'll use a little bit of assembly lube, get that greased up. Now when you're putting these in, you want the numbers on the outside of the seal to be to the outside. And then when you put it in there, make sure it's nice and even. Putting even pressure down on it, pushing it in. And then you want it seated all the way down, so it's, this one specifically is just even with the case edge there. So we got it fully seated there. Clean that off. And that's pretty much it to putting the seals back in. So if they're not seating all the way by just pushing on them, you can take a socket that's the same outside diameter as these seals, and then just use a mallet and tap those all the way down into place so that they're sitting nice and flush with the case there. As far as parts that we used during this build, all the bearings came from OEM distributor for Honda parts, so Honda Parts Direct. And then all the seals, those were purchased as a kit from Outlaw Racing, I believe. And so you can get those fairly inexpensively for the seals. Unfortunately, the bearings are pretty expensive. I think to get the full rebuild for mine, it was over $100 for just the bearings. So that's kind of an expensive endeavor. And I think that's mostly related to the age of the bike. Some of the newer bearings on the newer CRFs are actually quite a bit cheaper. So it is what it is. That's pretty much it for this week. Next week, I think we're going to get started on installing the new crankshaft with the main bearings and then the transmission into the case halves. And then we'll get those put back together and torqued down. So we'll go through all that next week. All right, thanks for watching. This has been another weekend adventure ride how-to. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along while we finish this lightweight adventure bike build.